Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into what I like to call the Great American Soccer Mystery. Basically, why does the US produce exactly zero elite players? I mean, think about the American sports machine for a second. We're talking NBA superstars, NFL legends, completely dominating the medal tables at the Olympics year after year, right? The infrastructure we have for athletic excellence is literally unmatched. But then, you look at men's soccer on the global stage, and it's like that whole vaunted production line just completely breaks down. It's wild. We're looking at a structural struggle that has baffled fans and analysts for decades, and it directly impacts how the US men's national team performs at those massive global tournaments we all passionately watch. So, why does a nation with such unbelievable resources, athleticism, and sporting culture fail to consistently produce world-class talent on the pitch? Well, to figure this out, we've got to follow the data.
And it all starts with a really simple yet honestly damning question. Back in 2023, when Matt Crocker took over as the sporting director of U.S. Soccer, he didn't just want opinions, he wanted hard data. So he hired this sports data firm, 21st Group, to really dig into the U.S. developmental pipeline. The mandate was super straightforward. Over the last decade, how many players has the United States produced that rank inside the global top 50? Seriously, I want you to take a quick guess in your head right now before we reveal the results. Think about the sheer size of the U.S. population. Think about the literally millions of kids running around playing youth soccer every single weekend. Got a number? Well, the answer that came back was a shocking zero. Absolutely none. Not a single top 50 player globally in the last 10 years. No way, right? And this brilliantly illustrates the massive disconnect we're exploring today. How in the world can a country that routinely sweeps the Olympics across dozens of completely different sports produce zero elite, top-tier global soccer superstars? The talent pool is obviously there, the athletic potential is definitely there, but something in the system is completely short-circuiting the whole process. So let's look at part one, the top 50 mystery, and this fundamental structural struggle. Okay, let's dive into this. We have to look at the foundational difference in how we actually develop young athletes here. Think about American football and basketball. If you're a talented kid in the US, you can play those sports to a highly competitive standard entirely for free, just right through the public school system. The entire pipeline is basically built into the educational infrastructure. Now, flip that and contrast it with US soccer. If you want to get the best coaching as a kid in America, the school system simply isn't going to cut it. You are essentially required to join a private specialized youth club. And as we're about to see, access to those clubs isn't just based on how good you are with a ball at your feet. Which brings us to part two, the pay-to-play barrier and a massive socioeconomic divide. Let's define exactly what we're talking about here. The pay-to-play system is basically a youth sports model that relies almost entirely on heavy financial contributions from parents. In a lot of other soccer-dominant nations, youth development is heavily subsidized. The professional clubs or national federations actually foot the bill because they see it as investing in their future assets. But here in the United States, that burden falls squarely onto the parents' bank accounts. And guys, this fundamentally changes the entire landscape. It dictates exactly who gets access to top-tier coaching, elite facilities, and those crucial scouting networks. Just to show you how crazy this gets, this system shocked even a global icon. The legendary Swedish striker Zlatan Ibrahimovic actually revealed in an interview that while he was playing professionally for the LA Galaxy, he looked into putting his two kids into a local youth club. His quote honestly speaks for itself. They told him the annual fee would be $35,000 per child. Per child! And okay, sure, while that's at the absolute high end in LA, the baseline isn't much better. Even average clubs can easily charge upwards of 10 grand a year, and that's before you even factor in the massive hidden costs. We're talking travel, hotels, new cleats, the whole shebang. This creates a socioeconomic barrier that is literally insurmountable for a huge portion of the country, especially low-income or immigrant families who often possess a deep generational love for the sport. But you know what? The financial barrier isn't even just about club registration fees. Data from the 2026 Project Play report reveals this absolutely stark divide in just access to transportation. 86% of high-income players are driven to practice by their families. Compare that to just 21% for low-income players. Because American infrastructure is so heavily car-dependent, simply having a vehicle and the parental free time to shuttle a kid to practice 3 times a week is a massive luxury. If your parents are working multiple jobs, or maybe you just don't have a reliable car, you are effectively aged out of elite soccer development by the time you're, 8 years old? This intense lack of access has created what researchers are actually calling football deserts. Basically, these are entire communities completely isolated from high-level coaching or facilities. And the contrast with the rest of the world here is just staggering. Matt Crocker pointed out in 2025 that in England, a young kid is never more than a 13-minute journey away from a free elite development program with highly qualified coaches. Just think about that. 13 minutes, and it's totally free. In the US, you could drive for an hour, cross a toll bridge, and still have to pay 10 grand at the door just to step on the field. No, some of you might be wondering, okay, but what about the players who came from humble beginnings? And it's true, there are some rare exceptions. But the absolutely crucial point here is how these exceptions basically prove the rule. Clint Dempsey, arguably one of the greatest American players ever, has spoken really openly about how his family had to literally go into debt to afford his youth soccer fees. Or take legendary goalkeeper Tim Howard. He admitted he only made it because he got, quote-unquote, lucky, that some of his youth coaches were willing to look the other way and secretly waive his costs. Let's be real here. When your national team relies on families going into heavy debt or coaches secretly bending the rules, you don't really have a systemic pipeline, do you? You have a lottery. And all of this builds into a pretty devastating timeline that U.S. Soccer calls the dropout funnel. Based on a report from U.S. Soccer itself, between the ages of 9 and 11, almost half of the kids playing soccer are likely to quit within the next year. And by age 14, a staggering 70% of all children have abandoned the sport entirely. The system is actively bleeding potential talent before these kids even reach high school. We are essentially filtering out the vast majority of our talent pool before we even have a chance to see how good they could actually be. And for the kids who actually do manage to stay, the environment is often just fraught with anxiety. According to a Project Play survey, when young players were asked what they liked least about playing on a team, a massive 32% segment cited one specific thing. It was too expensive. I mean, just think about the psychological toll that takes on a 10-year-old. They feel this immense, unspoken pressure of their parents' financial investment every time they step on the grass. It stops being a fun game and starts becoming this incredibly stressful return on investment. Let's move on to part 3, the tournament trap and the vicious cycle it creates. Because this whole system is funded by parental checks, youth clubs have a massive, massive incentive to keep those wealthy parents happy. And this creates a really vicious incentive cycle. Parents are paying these massive fees, so naturally they demand to see value for their money. So, to prove that value, clubs enter these high-profile travel tournaments to boost their national rankings and bolster the coach's own resumes. And once the club achieves that higher ranking, well, what do? They turn right around and use that new prestige to justify charging even higher enrollment fees next season. It's really just a business model disguised as player development. And let's look at what actually happens at these events. Former youth coach Shot Eubanks breaks down this grueling 36-hour tournament cycle for us. Step 1, you travel out of state. Step 2, you force teenagers to play 3 to 4 full 90-minute games over just a single weekend. I mean, that is absolutely brutal. Step 3, complete physical exhaustion sets in and injury risks absolutely skyrocket. And finally, step 4, by Sunday afternoon, the winner isn't the team with the most technical ability or tactical vision, it's simply the club with the deepest roster. It's literally a test of survival, not a showcase of actual soccer skill. So that brings us to part 4, winning over development, and how priorities completely shift. Let's compare these two philosophies, because the biological consequences here are huge. Because children go through puberty at wildly different paces, right? A 13-year-old who develops early physically can completely dominate a youth match just using pure pace, strength, and athleticism. Coaches, knowing they desperately need to win that Sunday tournament to keep parents happy, will instinctively prioritize these early developing physical players. Meanwhile, the smaller kid, who might be a little slower to develop physically, but actually possesses world-class technical quality and vision, the exact traits needed to actually be a top 50 global player, they just get left behind on the bench. We're literally selecting for early puberty, not elite long-term soccer potential. Which leads us perfectly into part 5, failed fixes and fractured systems. Just think about this number for a second, 54. Now, senior figures in U.S. soccer are well aware of all these development issues, but trying to reform it is incredibly difficult. Because there isn't just one youth soccer system in America. Within the U.S. Youth Soccer Association alone, there are 54 completely separate, disjointed state associations. States like California, Texas, New York, and Pennsylvania actually have 2 each. And every single one of these associations has its own season schedule, its own structural rules, and its own unique political concerns. Trying to implement a single, unified developmental philosophy across this vast, fractured landscape, it's a monumental task. It's like trying to solve a giant puzzle where none of the pieces even belong to the same box.
Now, there have definitely been attempts to bypass all this by creating free academies. Back in the mid-2000s, Major League Soccer teams began rolling out youth academies, where playing was actually free, kind of mimicking that European model. But rather than fixing the problem, unfortunately, they often just added to it. Look at this quote from former U.S. men's national team assistant coach Anthony Hudson back in 2024. He notes that these free academies often just pull from the exact same existing pool of wealthy kids who have already been developed by those expensive private clubs for the last decade. The barrier to entry isn't actually broken. The academies just act as a sort of finishing school for the kids who could already afford the journey in the first place.
And there is one final, really fatal flaw in this club ecosystem. In the rest of the world, when a top professional club takes a player from a small local youth team, they're actually required to pay what's called solidarity payments to compensate that club. This financial compensation rewards the local club for doing the hard work of developing the talent. But in the United States, MLS academies routinely poach the absolute best players from non-MLS youth clubs with zero financial compensation. Literally nothing. So starved of this vital financial reward, the local youth clubs are left with only one way to keep their doors open. They have to continually raise the enrollment fees on the parents, making the sport even more exclusive.
Which finally brings us to a really harsh reality. The United States is co-hosting the 2026 World Cup. The global spotlight has literally never been brighter. But as we've seen throughout this explainer, the foundation beneath the surface is severely fractured. It's a system dictated by parental wealth, plagued by these massive football deserts, incentivized by grueling tournament survival instead of technical development, and just completely fractured by administrative chaos. The athletes are out there for sure, but until the US can build a pipeline that actually selects for pure talent rather than just a family's ability to pay, that number of top 50 global players, it might just remain at zero. So what do you think it will actually take to finally break the pay-to-play barrier? Keep that question in mind as the entire world turns its attention to North America in 2026.